Okay, so we owe everybody half of a song or two-thirds of a song. You missed out today. At least I did. Good to see people here. Manny, it's good to have you back in the country from your self-imposed exile.
Thank you.
We look forward to hearing your comments on the Greek language when we get to something that has Greek involved.
Okay, hope I can handle it.
Good to have you back. Good to see everybody else here as well. And Megan, you're reacclimating yourself to the West Coast?
Yes, I am, and glad to be back.
Okay, well, if you missed the rain from the East Coast, it should be coming in any minute now.
I know, a few days.
Okay. All right. We're doing a small bit of text today because it's worth spending time on. But while there is a parallel in some ancient Near Eastern literature of this particular piece about wine, the dangers of wine, I'm guessing there's one in every wisdom, body, every wisdom collection around the world. Intoxication, haven't looked it up, but I'm guessing it's been around for many, many thousands of years. And with it are the dangers of intoxication, but also not just the pleasures, but the everyday life of it. As many of you know, that beer and wine were produced in European communities, at least, often by monastics, in order to be able to drink the water, to have something to drink, because the water wasn't potable, and it's been I'll speak for the culture that I know, ancient Near Eastern culture. It's all over the place, of course. There's no abstinence from. It's something that you're expected to use. It's praised. The probably the most famous line in the Hebrew scripture tradition is "Yain yismach levav enosh," that wine will make glad the heart of a human being, of a person, in the book of Psalms. And although it comes up from time to time in a negative fashion, and we'll see some of that today, it's a fact of life. And so it would be interesting for me, from a religious studies point of view, to trace the histories of the various faith traditions where wine is absolutely forbidden, to see where it came from and what historical reality. Don't know that I'm going to do it anytime soon, but it's something that would be on my bucket list. A lot of folks have bucket lists for where they want to go in the world. My bucket list is more like, what kind of things would I like to take a few months and just read and deep down, do a deep dive, and then connect it back to Judaism. Les.
Is there an example, another example or an example in Jewish liturgy that blesses something that's bad for you?
Well, so that's my point, is it wasn't assumed that it's bad for you.
Right. I mean, there's actually a blessing for it, but is there any example of anything else that there's a blessing for that later on they tell you and don't overdo it?
Okay, so there's a parallel to it. So I guess my point is that there's a blessing for it because it's not a bad thing per se. It can be misused. And the same thing could be said. Remember, we had the business about gluttony last week or the week before, and that the law of the son, who is ben sorer more, who is zolev sover, who was gluttonous, and that passage from rabbinic literature that I brought. So even eating meat, it can be seen as physical. But I think this is what you're asking. So smoking came up in I think I seen stuff maybe in the 19th century about smoking in Hasidic literature, Hasidic folk tales, which I understand some of them are serious. There is quite a bit about pipe, or there are stories of pipe smoking. And I had read.
Is there a bracha for it?
So not yet. So I read that the pipe smoking may have very well had to do with hash or something like that, that there was a connection. Who knows how much that's wishful thinking of kind of the neo-Hasidic hippies that I know, the guys that were hippies in the 70s and then became renewal Jewish thing. I don't know a lot about it, but when smoking came up in the 19th century, in the 20th century, after it was already known, I mean, Les, when did people know for sure smoking was bad for you? For sure? Late 60s, mid 60s?
Well, it started in the late 50s, and then they started in the 60s taking it out of TV commercials.
Okay, so like you see all these Mad Men, for instance, right? They're always smoking in many of these time. So the question came up is should there be a bracha over smoking a cigarette in the same way there is smelling spices, something aromatic, and all the more so, I would say, if it's a cigar, right? Or one of those, or pipe, the kind of pipes. Remember, people had, I saw a guy actually on the street walking in Palm Springs maybe over this weekend with a pipe. But remember, pipes, some of them had a nice kind of a smell to them, cherry and stuff like that. And I remember the discussion, but by the time I saw it was, no, absolutely not. There can't be a bracha for something which is detrimental to your health. It's tarte de satre. The two things that it's a tarte de satre is two things contradict. It's a self-contradiction. It's a kind of an oxymoron to make a blessing on something that's killing you, potentially killing you. So I think that would be the parallel to what you're asking, Les. So what I remember seeing in the halakhic literature, do you have to say a blessing for it? And the answer was at the time, late 60s, early 70s, was because some doctors say it's not good for you, then no. And then it became, is smoking, then in the halakhic literature, is smoking even permissible? And two approaches were taken. This is probably the 70s or the 80s, the literature that I'm talking about. One of them was Reb Chaim David Halevi, who was the Sephardic chief rabbi of Tel Aviv. Really, somebody I wish we knew more. I knew more about. Really, a kind of a stellar figure in the Orthodox world, in the official rabbinic world, who really had his feet on the ground. He wrote a number of books about halacha, Jewish law in Hebrew, in a kind of Hebrew which is easy to understand, not this kind of rabbinic Hebrew that you've got to know Talmud for. Very, very accessible. And he wrote about things that were happening, day-to-day stuff. Transcendental meditation, is that allowed? Is saying the mantra, is that avodah zarah? Is that idolatry? And smoking was one of them. And he's the first major posek, major halachic authority that I know of, who said, no, you got it. It's forbidden to smoke. It's going to kill you. How can you possibly? And the answer to that was, I remember saying, well, there might be a problem with it, but who are we to say, with all the tradition of generations of smokers in the yeshiva world, how could we possibly say it's a bad thing? Which is an interesting, kind of train of logic, right? Because our ancestors did it, how could it possibly be bad? One might say that not just about health things, but also about moral things, ethical things as well. That's kind of an answer when people say but it's our tradition. So yeah, yeah. So then coming back to today, if I'm not in that halachic world, as you know, but if I was, and somebody in the recovery community was to say, to talk about saying a blessing or not saying a blessing, or somebody who has a challenge with alcohol, not saying blessing, perhaps I too would say maybe don't say a blessing or drink without. I don't know what I would say, but yeah. But the main thing, Les, in answer to your question, is that people didn't see it as dangerous per se. They saw the dangers inherent in it, and that's our topic today, the danger of wine. And that comes up not only in wisdom literature here, it comes up in the legal material. I didn't bring that today. In the context of the death of Aaron's two sons, who offered a eish zara, a foreign fire, the improper fire to the incense at the dedication of the Mishkan, the tabernacle in the desert, and they died. God put them to death with the blast of a fire. Um, and it's not entirely clear why. The rabbinic mind kind of said, this is so severe that God would put them to death in front of everybody else, in front of their mother, watching the dedication of the temple, their father, the chief priest, the head priest. And so they looked at the juxtaposition of the paragraph of the material in the book of Leviticus, and the next thing after that particular section about the dedication of the temple comes the law that a Kohen must not be intoxicated while doing the avodah, doing the worship, doing the service itself in the temple. which the rabbis, many of them understood as, oh, the reason that's being brought up now is because it must be because the sons of Aaron, they went to work intoxicated. Because the background to that is how could they possibly be put to death just for making a mistake? Oh, they were intoxicated. Of course, there's other rabbis in the Talmud and Midrash that say, no, it's because they refused to get married. No, it's because they weren't respectful towards Moses and Aaron. There's a lot of things, but there you have that intoxication. But that's not a general rule. That's a rule towards the priests while doing their service. They're not to be intoxicated. There are stories that are negative about drinking. The most famous of anybody?
Noah?
Noah, right? And we'll get to that today. We'll do that today. Um, what we it's implied in certain things like Judah and Tamar in Genesis 38 that he was at the shearing of the sheep, which was a festival. Obviously, drink. There's drink, of course, mentioned quite a bit in Esther, um, and that's the whole plot of the story begins with a drinking party, right? Probably other things as well. Yes, Charles.
Purim.
Purim, yeah. We mentioned Purim last week or the week before because there was another verse, I think it was 2 weeks ago, that was dissing wine, and I mentioned that I brought one of the stories from the Talmud, whatever, last week or the week before, where one of the rabbis killed another rabbi and he was brought back to life, and they learned their lesson about drinking too much on Purim, right? And I have a whole slew of things that we've done as a group before, at least collectively, on drinking and too much drinking on Purim, or is it not enough drinking? And maybe we could. I have a lot of material on drinking. I grew up in a house where, as a kid, my father being a divorce lawyer, it was the martini lunch thing, right? I don't know if it was two martinis, but certainly martinis. I can remember not knowing what they were when he came home. Then he eventually he discovered aquavit. They were in Scandinavia a few times, so this kind of herb flavored vodka, I guess you'd call it, aquavit, and that was and chased by beer. He was very, very much into interesting beers from around the world. But by the late 60s, it was wine. And I've just coming back from LA where we met with a few realtors. And I don't believe I've ever given a house. I don't remember giving a tour of the house, of the entire house. And the room that was added on, or when we bought the house, it was taken over, was our playroom. It became, eventually when we all moved out, it became, it's the room where my brother would smoke grass with his friends in high school, with my parents' knowledge. And then when we moved out of the house in the 70s, my dad brought in a carpenter and put in things for wine and put in an air conditioning. And so it was a wine cellar for many, many years. And so it was in my background drinking, and perhaps that's why I've never been abusive in drinking. I've never, I don't think I've had a problem. I certainly can count the amount of times that I've really, really been drunk on one hand. And I think also with our daughters as well. They grew up with wine in the house, and it was with, controlled. It wasn't wild. We didn't keep it from them, so they didn't break out by, a lot of the behavior that things. Anyway, it's been in my mind quite a bit, and so over the years I've collected lots of sources about wine and drinking. And I brought two of them, that I'm very fond of. The two from Midrash Tanchuma, one of my favorite collection of midrashim, which we'll do after we look at Proverbs. But that explains why it's such a small part of Proverbs today. Okay. Although I should ask any questions or comments about what we've done in the past few weeks that somebody was thinking of, wanted to say something about.
Want to know if on your bucket list does the study of wine, your class on wine, come before or after your class on dogs?
So you mean the study of temperance?
Right.
That's the
Yeah.
word, right? The study of temperance and other faith traditions.
Yeah.
Well, the thing is, I've done the research on dogs. It's just a question of finding where on my computer, my vast, not hundreds, thousands of word files, and collecting them and translating the sources into English. So I see, so that's not that's not really on my that's on your bucket list. It's on my obligation to you as something I
Oh, my-
promised you years ago. So I haven't forgotten the promise. It will happen. One day it will happen. Is there like a National Dog Day? There must be a National Dog Day.
If not, I'm gonna start one just to force you.
Richard, so that's your homework, Richard. Figure out what would be the auspicious date for us to do a special learning session on dogs in the Jewish tradition. Okay. All right. Now, Richard, the Hebrew here of the first line is for you. I don't think you can you handle the Hebrew, read the Hebrew? I don't think so, right?
No, I can't read Hebrew, no.
Okay, but I'm going to read it for you, and this is especially for you, Richard.
All right.
Lemi, oi, lemi avoy. And which translates who cries woe, who cries alas. Why am I singling out Richard here? Because Richard learned, I think, from Moore or from me years ago, the Israeli Hebrew expression, Richard,
Oy voy voy,
or it's oy vavoy.
oy
It's
va voy,
actually oy va'avoy.
va
And,
voy.
and this is where it comes from. It comes from this particular verse. Oi, and all of you who thought that oi was an Eastern European a Yiddish thing, well, the Yiddish comes from the Hebrew. In this case, not often, more often it's from German, right? But here, oi, it's a krech. It's literally onomatopoeia, right? It's like it's not a, oi. When we get up, we instinct. Maybe I don't know. Do Mormons in Utah when they get up and they're old and they're overweight? Do they also say oi?
Only if they have a Jewish friend.
Or they say, I don't know. Okay. Anyway, this is Oy Va'avoy. I don't know. That's a good one for you, Diane. You being our Hebrew expert here. So Oy Va'avoy. Okay, so Richard, why don't you read 2935 for us in English?
Okay, who cries woe? Who alas? Who has quarrels or who complains? Who who complains? I guess. Um, who has wounds without cause? Who has bleary eyes? Those who
I'm sorry, I'll just interrupt. It's who has it's implied who has complaints, who has quarrels, who complains, who by fire, who by it's the rhetorical of the text here. Go ahead.
those whom wine keeps till the small hours, those who gather to drain the cups, do not ogle the red wine, as it lends its color to the cup, as it flows on smoothly. In the end, it bites like a snake. It spits like a basilisk.
Don't know how to pronounce it, but and others translate here viper.
Oh, okay. Whose eyes will see strange sights. Your heart will speak distorted things. You will be like one lying in bed on high seas, like one lying on top of the rigging. They struck me, but I felt no hurt. They beat me, but I was unaware. As often as I wake, I go after it again.
Okay, let's take it apart. But a nice little what does he calls it? He has an epigram. He coins this literary unit as an epigram. That is Michael Fox. So take it line by line. We'll look at the Hebrew. We have a few people, folks, that can follow the Hebrew now. I talked about lemi oi, lemi avoy. Next one is lemi midyanim, having to do with quarrels. Dayan from the word dayan, dalid yud nun din, but when it's a hitpael reflexive, it's arguing. So who's arguing? And who to just here the word could be siach is any kind of conversation, but in the context it would be just too many words. I think I don't know necessarily complaints, but too many words. And then also who has wounds without a cause. In other words, they wake up in the morning, they've got this huge gash on their arm, or a black eye or whatever it is, and they have no explanation. That's what I think, like ptsaim chinam, wounds without cause, I think. The mihachilut einaim, who has bleary eyes. Fox translates here bloodshot eyes, or dark eyes. Achlilut is darkness. That's the meaning of the word. And so Fox says that if your eyes are really bloodshot, then it looks like you have dark eyes. He says in any case, it's the opposite of sparkling eyes. I might want to think here that perhaps it's also darkness of vision. It's hard. Or I also thought maybe, when you've had too much to drink, you get dark bags under your eyes as well, right? I think. I don't know. The certainly bloodshot is part of it. So in other words, this is the rhetorical opening of this particular epigram, and so who has all these things? Who's the krachting one? Who's the oy vavoy? Who's the one with this? The pace? I have no idea where I got this from, but all this comes from the one who is lemachrim al hayayin. So we had in English here the one whom wine keeps till small hours. Ma'acher, la'acher is to be late, is to stay up late. The one who stays up late with wine. Imagine somebody sitting in the bar until late. But not only, and so that's one side of stay up late. The other one is the one who ponders his cup. In Hebrew, lebaim lachkor mimsach. So those coming to labaim. Lachkor is the same word as to investigate, to do a deep dive. Cheker. Cheker amikra is research. Mechar is research, to look into. So the gathering to drain the cup here is in some English translations, but Fox, I think, says here is the one who is pondering his cup, the one who's looking in, examining. The mimsach is probably the mixture of wine. In ancient times, they didn't drink wine that was let's call it raw, for better for, or the pure wine. It was diluted with water. I remember asking that question when I was in yeshiva, and I knew that we didn't dilute water. We had wine, and I knew from my father, who would love to visit vineyards across California, and knew a bit about the winemaking process, that no water was added to it. That would be something you wouldn't do, right? Or I remember once we were out to eat, and a friend of his, a running buddy of his, she put ice in her Chardonnay or whatever it was. My father couldn't take it. You know, that was one of the times when my mother would say, "Oh, Reuben, enough, Reuben, enough." Um, so what I was explaining when I was in yeshiva was, oh, the wine then was much more powerful than it is today. The grapes of old were far, far stronger. The alcohol content was much more. Perhaps that's the case. I don't know. But in fact, the word in Hebrew, Dalit, how do you say to pour in Hebrew? Do you know? To pour? If you unmute yourself.
I was looking at the document. Like limsoch, you're saying?
No, so limsoch would be the mixed wine, but
Or
limzog,
limzog?
limzog, yeah, the word limzog really means to mix.
Oh.
Hence, a mazgan is an air conditioner. It mixes cool air with the warm air of your house, and mezag avir is the weather. And mizug tov means a good mixture, but limzog is to pour, because it's taken from the Talmud, when mozgim lo kos rishon, at the description of the Seder night, it's not when they pour. Some translations are when they pour his first cup of the 4 cups of the person sitting in the night. It actually means when they mix it with water. And rendering it, ready to drink. In any case, that's what mimsach is probably a more accurate or a plainer meaning of this is one who's checking the wine, checking the mixture of the wine. I would say today, like, you go to the wine testing and you look at it in the light and you swirl it around and you look at it from here, the things that people do. While in those days, Fox imagines somebody just staring into his cup. He's drunk, the way that we would imagine a drunk in the bar, just looking into his cup, because he's not there to socialize, he's just there to drink. Or maybe when it's done, he just sees the dregs at the bottom of the cup. I would say, if we were to translate that into today, it might be the people who talk, the people that, no offense to anybody here, but the people who talk a little bit too much about wine, when you sit down and, most of us just want to kind of drink it and enjoy it. But some people, it's the look and the this and the bouquet and the this and what, the terroir and all these different kinds of things. An anecdote, how could I not tell one? We were once in Tel Aviv, and the twins, who were teenagers at the time, were with us for Shabbat. We had many guests. I remember, because the table was extended. I remember exactly how we were sitting in the living room, dining room in Tel Aviv. and somebody brought some really good wine. And I'm sitting with the twins, and they're probably 16, 17 at the time or so. And we make kiddush, drink the wine, and everybody says, it's good wine, whatever. And so one of them says, yeah, she says strawberries, and the other one says, a bouquet, some sort of blueberry, some other kind of apples or something like that. And I said to them, your Saba would be so proud of you. You know that you're identifying the taste. They burst out laughing. They said, Abba, look, says it on the back of the bottle. Hints of this. So, all right, enough anecdotes. Back to the text. Um, so the next part is Al tere yain ki yit adam. Don't ogle the red wine as it lends its color to the cup. In other words, don't be fascinated so much that you're fixated. You're obsessed with the wine. You're obsessed with the redness of the wine because there's something attractive about it. I almost wanted to say here that it feels like that this comes from a culture of glass, of transparent glass, because it lends its color to the cup. I almost want to say that. Today we could say that. I don't think that's the case. I don't know about archaeology. I don't think I've seen glass. There's Phoenician glass. So maybe it does come from that. I don't know. That would be a question for our daughter Debbie, who worked in the Rabbi Debbie, who worked for many years in the Bible Lands Museum, which is an archaeological museum in Jerusalem. But I know this verse from a totally different context. From the Jerusalem Talmud, there's a bit in talking about the preference of red wine for the Seder. Right? One should seek red wine because they had white wine at that time. Huh? One should seek red wine because of this verse. Because the verse is, when it's wine, it gives a redness to the cup. To which the halachic authorities afterwards say, but if you really want white wine, go ahead. But it's best to have red wine for the Seder. There's other authorities.
I thought it's so you can have it for the drops of blood.
So others say there is one authority from, I'm pretty sure it's Ashkenaz, 13th, 14th century, says because it looks like blood. It's better to have it because it looks like blood, right? But I think that interpretation that we did afterwards, so the taking of the drops out of the cup is not just about the Nile turning into blood, right? It's all 10 plagues.
Mhm.
And the truth of the matter is one doesn't have, one can spill out. The idea there is to not have a full cup, I think as many people here, not to have a full cup of joyful, fullness is joy when God's creations were dying in the sea.
And don't lick your finger at the end.
Yeah, we have a friend who insists on she drinks dry, wonderful red wines all year round, but she insists at the Seder that she needs to have, the Manischewitz kind of sweet red wine, to which every year she was at our Seder for, 3 decades every year. And I always bought a bottle of sweet red wine, not in Concord kind of wine. They didn't have Concord, but in Israel. And every year they had the same bottle of wine at Pesach that we had this much missing from it. It's okay. All right. So yeah. So a verse that I never studied in context. I know it from Jerusalem Talmud. This reminds me of when I asked our high school Rebbe, my high school Rebbe in Rambam, Rabbi Spurka, I said, how come we don't study more Navi, prophets and writings? How come we only really focus on the 5 books of Torah? He says, well, yeah, he says, you'll get it in the Haftarot. Of course, the Haftarot are such a small amount. Dan, you know that, right? The percentage of biblical text which is covered by the Haftarot, the additional readings on Shabbat, is minuscule. And he said, and you'll get it through the references in the Talmud. So what I said, what do you mean? He says, well, when you have a reference in the Talmud, don't just gloss over it. Go get a Tanakh, open it up, and look in the context. Yeah, I don't think you're going to make it through all the text, and of course, you won't appreciate the literary forms and development in plots, whatever it might be. Anyway, good for me. It was good for me to see this particular verse in context. I certainly don't remember it from before, and I only remember the Talmudic quote. Okay. it flows smoothly, right? In other words, it's enticing. It's seductive. The wine is seductive to your senses, to your eyesight, to to the throat. Um, but what does it bring about? In the end, it'll bite you like a snake or a different kind of a viper, snake, different types, and you'll see strange sights. The word here is einecha yiru zarot. Your eyes will see strangeness. V'libcha, your heart, or often I don't know why he went with heart here, JPS translation, because mostly they go with your mind. I think they've been doing mind, but anyway, your heart, your mind, you will see tapuchot from the shorish hefech hafach, which means topsy-turviness. Here, distorted things, tapuchot, upside down. Everything is crazy. And it'll be as if you're lying, not the text here is you're lying in the heart of the sea, in the depths of the sea. But of course, the context here demands that you're lying in a bed. It's not that you're drowning. There is one commentator from many years ago in the early 20th century who said it's like you're drowning, but this is not about drowning. This is about being nauseous. It's about feeling
Seasick.
well, seasick, but also, if you drink, at least at my age, at our age, when you drink a little bit too much in the evening, we don't sleep well, right? We're tossing and turning. So that's kind of that. I think that's the idea. You don't sleep well. You're nauseous, seasick, um, and then it augments that same metaphor of being on a boat or being in the sea. Kishochev barosh chibel, that he's lying on top of the root is the word comes from ropes, um, but it probably it's rigging here. It has to do with it's interesting. I hadn't thought about it until looking at this word today, that the Hebrew for captain of a ship is Rava Chovel, the master of the rope. But Chovel probably means the ropes that are used in putting the sails up or things like that. Perhaps it's yeah. Okay. And then this once you've woken up, right? So you've had a bad night, and then when you wake up, it feels like I was struck, but I don't remember it. I felt no hurt. I have no idea what happened. I blacked out. This is like the next morning after a blackout. They beat me. I was unaware. So that's it really flows the progression of developing this idea here of what it is. And then the end, Mataya Keats, but when I arise, when I wake up, I it could be when or as often as or whenever I wake up, Osif evaksheno, I'll still go back and look for the wine again. I don't know if there's someone here who would like to share with us from their own experience, but or experience of others, if this rings true.
Well,
Very true.
very true.
Whoever wrote this, I think, experienced it.
Yes.
He didn't just watch somebody, he did it himself.
And
So-
I know I've asked this before, but do we have any idea who and when this section was written and added to Proverbs?
No, I don't think so. He probably does. I don't remember, but we're going to say, probably, I would say 6th, 5th century BCE. That would be my guess. It's not, there's nothing late about it. But why do you ask? Is there something that you feel is later or earlier?
No, the semantics, the mood, the tenor is so different than the early chapters.
Okay.
I mean, it's like totally different person, different era, different editor, and I anyway.
Yeah, the only parallel that Fox brings is ani. And because that wasn't our focus today, I didn't look up let's see if I can find something quickly.
That's all right. We can, I mean, I keep asking the same question when it looks different to me or I don't like it.
Okay, so there's something from the 18th dynasty of the New Kingdom, which means that it's Great, you don't tell me when it is, how am I supposed to know when that is? Yeah, anyway, it's ancient Egyptian literature, which is far older than the Tanakh, and there's a parallel to it. It's not as, it's 3 lines as opposed to, these 15 lines, 10 lines, whatever. So that would mean it would be earlier less. It
So
would
does that
be-
take it back to what we were talking about, Solomon's scribe, the influence of Solomon's Egyptian scribe?
Perhaps there would be those that would be a more traditional way of looking at it, to place it already in the 10th century BCE. But it doesn't have to be Solomon's scribes. It's all scribal culture in Israel was influenced by its surroundings, whether it was Mesopotamia or whether it was Egypt. So yeah, a good piece. When I was training to do spiritual counseling for addiction at Beit Tshuva, many of you remember those days, when we were going to open up a clinic. I didn't run into this, but this would be a way of connecting the spiritual therapy, if I can call it therapy, the spiritual session that I would do with the folks that were there, the clients, the residents, they called them, the residents of Beit Tshuva. This would be the kind of a thing, and the goal would be to see that it's not a new problem, it's not a new modern phenomena, it's an ancient phenomena, and this idea of being of hard to get out of it, of breaking the cycle, is in age old wisdom. And so maybe it's less of this is a result of my parents, or this is a result of, I don't know where I would go with it, but I think, yeah. And I'm glad to have this piece now to be able to utilize. I would also, I had told you before, I did sexual ethics with the older kids in the Masorti, the conservative movement in Israel. And I did with substance abuse stuff as well. Yeah. And so this would be a great text to use, and maybe split them into smaller groups or chavrutot couples to do, and with a set of questions. I think it's good code. So any questions about the biblical text before we go on to rabbinic text, or comments? In the meantime, Richard, instead of paying attention to what we've been doing right now, he's been doing research on National Dog Day, August 26th. Oh, come on. Well, it's a Wednesday though, but August 20, don't we usually take a break on August 26th, All right. And we want a big turnout for this, Richard.
Rabbi,
Yes,
oh,
Harold.
just remember, I don't know why the 26th in particular, but keep in mind that that's the height of the summer, and those are the dog days of the summer.
Yeah, fair.
There you
Very
go.
excellent. Dog days of the summer. Okay. So Dan, I'm going to turn to you, but before we get to the rabbinic text, that you had a little gleam in your eye, not a darkness in your eye, but you had a gleam in your eye. Anything you want to tell us about your reactions to the biblical text? You don't have to.
Well, I have had trouble relating and and grabbing onto the text. I must admit throughout the course, but this is the first. It feels like the most extended selections we've done, and it like the writer was really into it.
So this is a
I guess I had the same reaction Les did. It sort of jumped out at me more than other things we've read.
Yeah, I'll remind all of us, that in the beginning of Proverbs, there were lectures. Now, they may not have been as interesting. This is an interesting topic for all of us, I think. Whether we still drink or whether we once drank and that was an issue in our lives. This is, it's very colorful. It's very successful from a literary point of view, right? From the imagery that's used. Yeah. Okay, so Midrash Tanchuma, I think 6th or 7th century. Other scholars put it later. To my mind, because it doesn't feel like in any case, it's never quoting, except for certain areas where you can see a piece was added by one of the manuscripts. which is a quote from the Talmud, a large section, it doesn't seem to be swimming in the sea of Talmud, as we say, Yam Shel Talmud. So I would say, yeah, I would say 6th or 7th century. Of course, there's greater experts than I am. Midrash Tanchuma from the genre of Midrash, which is homiletic Midrash, which means it's a whole package with a proem, with an opening kind of a thing, which we know from various Midrashim, the kishkes of the text, and then an ending on a positive note of salvation, of hope for the future, of comfort. Lots of stories, no law whatsoever, other than a particular opening, kind of a proem, which is called a proem with a halachic question, where somebody would get up in the synagogue and say, "Rabbi, what's the law?" Sometimes it's a authentic question. Sometimes it's a what we call a klutzkasha. It's a stupid question, like an obvious. Yeah, there's one that's Parshat Lech Lecha. Says, "Rabbi, please tell us, from what day do we circumcise a baby boy?" Like, not everybody knew it was. Of course, everybody knew it was the 8th day, but it gave the rabbi a way of answering the question, bringing a verse, weaving his way through later texts, mostly from prophets or from Psalms, other books, and weaving his way back into the Torah portion to the real text that he wanted to talk about. So this first section is from Noah, and it's about the latter part of the story after Noah lands. They get out, they leave the ark, and he plants a vineyard, as we see, and miraculously he's got wine like right away. The story is telegraphic; it skips right through to the sub, and he drinks, he gets drunk, and there's something goes on. He shows his nakedness, whether it's his son or his grandson, it's a little unclear, but out of that comes a curse which will be understood as a curse to the people of Canaan. Go ahead, Midrash Tanchuma.
Rabbis have taught, the same day that Noah planted the vine, it bore fruit. He harvested the grapes, pressed them and made wine, drank from the wine, and became intoxicated. On that very same day, he was greatly shamed.
Yeah, so that's serious telescoping, right? It all happened in one day, okay?
The rabbi said, when Noah was about to plant a vineyard, Satan stood before him and asked, "What is that you're planting?" "A vineyard," answered Noah. "And what good is a vineyard?" "Its fruits are sweet," answered Noah, "whether fresh or dried, and one makes them from them wine that gladdens the heart." So Satan said to him, "Let us be partners in the vineyard." "Fine," said Noah. What did Satan do? He brought a lamb and slaughtered it at the foot of the vine. Afterwards, he brought a lion and killed it there, then a pig, and finally he killed a monkey in the same place. This was a sign. Before drinking wine, one is like a pure lamb whose virgin wool has never been cut. Upon drinking one's fill, one becomes fearless like a lion, saying, "There is no one like me." When one has drunk too much, one becomes like a pig, wallowing in its urine and excrement. And when one is really drunk, one turns into a monkey, goofing off, dancing around, and foul-mouthed for all to see, all the while unaware of what is happening. All this happened to Noah, the righteous one. And if this happened to Noah, one who is explicitly praised by God for his deeds, just imagine what happens with a normal person.
Tell me this isn't one of the greatest excerpts from Midrash you've ever seen. I love this one. I rarely get a chance to use it, to teach it, but it just, what a sense of humor and entertainment. I don't know. I mean, I'm always amazed that they knew what a monkey was, right? How
Yeah.
it means, I guess, that with Alexander's conquest of all the lands of the world, his monkeys were brought to, wealthy people or something. But there are no monkeys that are, indigenous to the land of Israel. Not that I know of. There are lions, but or maybe they just had stories about monkeys. Any comments or questions about this? Okay, so that was Noah, one story about wine, negative in the Torah. The second one is, as I mentioned, is connected to the two sons of Nadav Avihu, the two sons of Aaron, the high priest. who died at the hands of God. God killed them because they offered the wrong fire. They didn't wait for God's fire to kindle the incense in their censers, and instead brought a regular fire. But that didn't stop the rabbis from understanding that that it had to do with wine because of the juxtaposition of what comes after that story. Go ahead, Dan. Do this one as well, please.
See that which is written about the sons of Aaron, as they were assistant priests and erred with wine, as so did they, may their memory be blessed. Say that they were inebriated with wine, and hence the Holy One, blessed be he, commanded after their death to warn about wine, as it is stated, wine and strong drink shall you not drink, you and your sons with you.
No, because that's the explanation of the juxtaposition that I mentioned beforehand. Okay.
The Holy One, blessed be he, said, be careful with wine. See that which Noah did, as he began to err with it, as it is stated in Genesis, and Noah, the man of the earth, began to plant a vineyard. And it is written, and he drank from the wine, and he became drunk, and he revealed himself. What caused him to become disgraced? The wine. And it caused him to bring a curse upon his seed, as it is stated. And he said, cursed is Canaan. And hence, be warned about wine, since wine brings a person to all the sins in the world, to licentiousness, to the spilling of blood, to theft, and to all the other sins in the world.
Okay, we can see that is this is this the same part of the homily? Because it feels like it's overdone. And this is if I was researching this particular midrash, I would look at the different manuscripts, and there's variation between manuscripts, not huge, sometimes it's the same, more or less, but not just spelling or one word different or mistakes. But could this be a section that one scribe added because, oh, I know something else about wine? That's kind of how you get the feeling sometimes the form is dictated by whatever the scribe wanted to do as opposed to the original literary source. Okay, go ahead.
And does it not gladden the heart of man? And the verse, yeah, I'm remember. And does it not gladden the heart of man? And the verse praise it like one reading in the Torah, as it is stated in Psalms. And wine gladdens the heart of a man, and it states, the precepts of the Lord gladdening the heart. And further, he bequeaths the Garden of Eden to those occupied with Torah and its precepts, as it is stated, as it is your life and the length of your days. And a drunk, when the wine is still with him, sits happily as if he was sitting in the Garden of Eden.
Okay, this is the pretext of what's going to follow. This is the lead-in to this story that the rabbi, the giving the sermon, wanted to include. So he bridges it by going into this kind of, on one hand, it gladdens the heart, and the other hand, you've got on one hand does all this negative stuff, the other hand it gladdens the heart. And speaking of gladdening of the heart, the ultimate gladdening of the heart is sitting in the Garden of Eden. The reward of the world to come for doing what God commands, and that's his lead into this story.
The resolution is like the story of the student who is a pious man.
I'm sorry, I said the resolution, meaning that it seems to be two things that contradict each other.
Yeah.
On one hand, okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
That student who was a pious man, and he had a father that drank heavily. And each time he would fall in the marketplace from drinking, people would come and hit him with stones and pebbles, and they would yell and call out behind him, look at the drunkard. And when his son, the pious man, saw, he was embarrassed and wished for his soul to die. And every day he would say to his father, I will order it, and they will bring you from every wine that they sell in the province to your house. Just don't go to drink in the tavern, such that you make a disgrace of yourself and of me. And he would say this to them once or twice every day, say this to him once or twice every day, until his father said that he would do this, as he said, not go drink in the tavern. And so did the pious man do, that he would make food and drink for him every day and every night and put him to sleep in his bed and then leave. One time, rain was falling, and that pious man went out to the marketplace and was walking to the synagogue for prayer. And he saw a drunkard laying in the marketplace, and a puddle of water was falling on him. And the young man and the youths were hitting him with stones and pebbles and throwing clay in his face and into his mouth. When this pious man saw, he said in his heart, I will go to father and bring him here, and will show him this drunkard and the disgrace that the young men and the youths make out of him. Maybe he will prevent his mouth from drinking in the tavern and from getting drunk. And so did he do. He brought him to there and showed the drunkard to him. What did his old father do? He walked over to the drunkard and asked him, in which tavern he drank that wine from which he became drunk? His pious son said to him, Father, for this did I call you, rather to see the disgrace they make out of him? So do they do to him at the time that you drink. Maybe you will prevent your mouth from drinking in the tavern. He said to him, my son, I have no enjoyment in the garden of Eden in my life besides this.
Also sound familiar to some who have had experience with alcoholism or with addiction. It's an interesting, from a literary point of view, the use of the mouth here, the mouth which drinks the wine, the mouth which is, the kids shove the clay into his mouth, the mouth of speaking, this conversation back and forth as if there's a way to reason. That's an interesting device, literary device, the mouth here in this story. The hopelessness of the old man. All he thinks to say to this person is, "Where'd you get the good stuff from? Hey, that looks like good stuff. Where'd you get it from?" Um,
How come
the fact that
how come there's no judgment against these kids that are throwing rocks at this guy?
because it's not the topic. That's that's our sensitivities, right? The topic is in this way, the rabbis of old were far more focused and effective than I am. For instance, rhetorically, where I'm all over the place with constant distractions and wherever going down rabbit holes. He's very focused. He wants to talk about the futile attitude of a drunk.
But
And
also, the father was willing to stay in the house and wouldn't have left it, except the son then went to get him to try to teach him another lesson. Like one lesson was enough, he was staying in the house, but the son had to go get him to teach him a second lesson to reinforce it, and it did just the opposite.
it didn't work. We're not even sure it worked the first one either. So that's what I meant by the word futile, right? So nobody comes out smelling roses here, right? Certainly not the boys that are the hoodlums that are the bullies, and not the man and not the son either, really. Because what was the motivation of the son? Do you remember?
To avoid embarrassment.
Right? It wasn't his father's health necessarily. It's one of those folk tales. Now, I would not be surprised to find this folk tale in other cultures, perhaps maybe it was adapted from Roman culture or whatever. Somebody came by through Palestine in the middle of the first millennium with these kind of stories. It's a folk tale, right? It's a folk tale that's been used, and with the change of one element. You don't need to have the fact that he was going to synagogue in the morning, right? Other than it helps from a literary point of view, because why else would he be out in the rain? I like the idea of the rain also because Instagram wasn't working because it was raining, and not Instagram.
Internet.
No, the food delivery.
Oh, Instacart.
Grubhub?
Instacart wasn't when it was raining, so because what he did, he got Instacart for him, right? He said, "Don't go out. I'll have the booze delivered to your home and food," right? Yes, Sasha.
Before we bury people, we put actually clay on the face, on the mouth and eyes. Do they connect it to death, like they're almost dead?
Yeah. So Sasha's asking about in the Chevra Kadisha, you may know that the pottery, a piece of clay is put on mouth and eyes for those that are about to be buried and then wrapped in shrouds. Is that connected to this? I would say my instinct says no. That's connected to no longer seeing, no longer breathing, eating, I think. I would guess. And also I think it's connected to other cultures that do the same thing. I don't remember. But yeah, but it does elicit that though, to put a piece of clay in somebody's mouth, right? Yeah. Yeah. Anything else?
I came across a story once upon a time in Vayikra Rabbah that this reminded me of.
Do you remember the details?
Yeah, I just looked it up. I wrote a little article about it once, briefly. A man much given to drink, if I may.
Yes, please.
A man much given to drink sells household possessions to feed his thirst. His sons, fearing for their inheritance, devise a scheme to reform him. They make him drunk to the point of insensibility and deposit him in the cemetery, hoping that when he awakens, his surroundings will provide a lasting, sobering experience. When he sleeps it off, some traveling wine merchants leave their goods in the cemetery for safekeeping while they go off to explore what's happening in town. The drunkard wakes up, avails himself of the bounty about him. 3 days later, the sons go to check on him and take the abundance of drink as a sign of the will of the Creator. They bow to the divine by henceforth taking turns supplying their father with drinks on a daily basis.
I love it. So my initial reactions are one, my guess, my wager would be that this is Vayikra Rabbah on the same Seder. They're not dealing with Parshat HaShavua in ancient land of Israel. They're dealing with Starot. Like some of you may remember, somebody would say when we were younger, the Sedra. What does the Sedra say? That's actually a misuse of the word. Sedra is the old land of Israel division of the Torah into a 3.5-year cycle. And so it's not, although it's printed in Tanhuma as Shmini is part of the Babylonian yearly cycle. My guess it would be the same thing. That's one comment. My wager would be it's from the same Torah portion. And the second thing is that there is a dependency of Tanhuma, Vayikra, Tanhuma of Leviticus on Leviticus Rabbah. That was part of that relationship was a huge part of the topic of my PhD dissertation, which, as most of you know, never was finished, but was in the making. And that was the research, was the section that I was doing, which was not from here, was from an earlier part of Leviticus, had to do with the relationship between the earlier Midrash from the 3rd, 4th century and the later Midrash from the 6th, 7th century. Yeah, Manny, did you want to say something?
No, I'm fine, thank you.
Okay.
Fascinating because I can relate a lot to this. I've been sober now for 2.5 years, and it's wonderful. I just couldn't control myself with wine.
Yeah. Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so this was a different kind of a study. I'm guessing more enjoyable than usual. It was more focused. With the text lent itself to it, and because this is a topic that interests me, I knew where to look for. I had these at hand. I had these midrashim at hand. But that's great, Dan. What you did, that's fantastic. That's the kind of stuff that I want to encourage everybody to do, to make those connections and then ask what is the relationship between the texts, for instance, besides being on the same topic. Yeah. Okay, so maybe Stan, if you get a chance, just send me the citation and I'll add it to my notes on this week and put it with my Word docs. It is 12 o'clock. I can't believe we finished exactly. Yes, Les, anything?
No, I've got to say goodbye. I have another 12 o'clock Zoom.
Okay. Goodbye, everybody. I'll see some of you tomorrow in person at the Tolerance Center. I will be giving a lecture on Rebecca at the Well, on matchmaking, camels, and forgot the third, and Rebecca maybe, utilizing some artwork from Bill Gross's collection and midrashic work, the biblical text as well. Hope to see you then. If not, Sunday, everybody at Gray Coffee House. Lovely, lovely little concert at 4
We
o'clock.
also have the Micah in the afternoon, right?
Yes, we
Tomorrow?
have Mike. I'll be back I'll be leaving early the conference for